Hi everyone, and welcome to the Newsagent podcast. I'm Susie Lysett, Good Lord Senior Content Executive, and today I'm joined by Darren Owen, Sales Manager at Infinite Property, to talk through how the agency's managed to expand its activities across England to look for a new pool of landlords and tenants while maintaining its base of operations in Warrington up in North England. So thanks very much for joining me today, Darren.
No problem. Nice to speak to you.
Well, first off, it'd be great to learn a bit more about you. So if I could please ask you just to tell us a bit about your background and obviously a bit about Infinite Property as well, that'd be great.
Of course, yeah. So my personal background, I've been in estate agency for the last sort of 20 years now. Started off in FS actually as a mortgage broker for Countrywide, and then moved into various different roles and gradually transferred from FS over to property kind of around 2006 time, 2007. Worked for a couple of sort of large property investment companies, and then joined Infinite in a sort of official capacity about 3 years ago. The Infinite's owned by my wife and a good friend of mine. They own the business, and I've always sort of done some consultancy work with them and things like that. But yeah, joined as a sales manager officially about 3 years ago. So my role now is obviously dealing with the sales side of the business, so the high street estate agency, but also kind of in terms of business development for the letting side, helping bring in new landlords, finding new avenues for business. So that all falls into the sort of sales manager, the banner, if you like.
And obviously with you wearing those two hats, what do you like about each side of it, just as a bit of an icebreaker to our conversation?
Well, firstly, I get through all the nice side of the lettings business. So I get to meet all the landlords, bring them into the business, and do all the nice meet and greet side. The sales side, I've always been really interested. I've always loved the estate agency, helping people move home, helping people buy an investment. It's quite a rewarding job, actually, when it goes right. Don't get me wrong, there's loads of downsides, there's lots of stressful times, but yeah, I've always really enjoyed it. I've always enjoyed buying and selling property myself. So yeah, it's challenging, particularly in the current climate, but yeah, it's a good job. I've always enjoyed it.
I think any job without challenges can become boring over time. So
Correct.
I think that's not necessarily a bad thing. Fantastic. Well, let's delve into a little bit, learn a bit more about Infinite Property, perhaps, just to gain an understanding as to how you work, I suppose. I mean, would you say? Let's look at your customers, your clients. I mean, would you say initially that you have any particular profile of tenant or landlord that you work with? Is it quite expansive, or do you tend to work with a specific pool or demographic?
So landlord-wise, it's a real mixed bag, to be honest with you. I mean, we started like most traditional high street agents where you work with your local market. Most of our landlords were people who lived locally and bought locally. They were quite sort of hands-on, but still didn't want to have that day-to-day interaction with the tenant. So they would appoint a letting agent to deal with the day-to-day work, collecting rents, maintenance, etc. Then that sort of shifted to we were dealing more with people from out the area, but buying in Warrington. Around sort of 2005, 2006, there's a real shift from people down in the southeast to start buying in the northwest because the yields were better, the price point was better. So, we started to deal with people who were buying at arm's length, if you like. And now we deal with people all over the world that are buying properties all over the country: Warrington, Manchester, London, the north of England. So it's a real mixed bag now in terms of landlord profile. Obviously, that change in landlord profile has changed the tenant profile as well. So again, our traditional market was always sort of the terraced house market around Warrington. You standard 2 up, 2 downs. That's what most landlords were buying when we first started. The sort of landlords that we deal with now tend to buy sort of big, shiny city centre apartments, Manchester, Liverpool, London, because that's the market that they're into. So, yeah, the last few years have seen a real change in both landlord and tenant profile.
No, it's interesting that you are seeing that change. And in terms of the tenant profile, would you say that recent events have had a real impact in terms of what the tenant is looking for? Has it accelerated that kind of change in profile almost?
Yeah, because we deal with so many different types of properties and in so many different locations, it's hard to really pinpoint what's going on in the market sometimes, because the English property market is one thing, but there's so many demographics within that, so many different locations we work with. Manchester and Liverpool aren't that far apart, but they're totally different in terms of the way they operate as cities and the tenants and the landlords. So there's lots of little markets within a market, if you like, that we work in. I think generally for a while, COVID certainly caused problems within the apartment market. There was lots of people who didn't want to live in apartments for a good 2 years because of lack of outside space, and they've been potentially trapped in an apartment during COVID. So we're certainly seeing in most of the locations where we manage properties that 3-bed properties have had a real big premium in terms of their price rise because of the working from home culture. So, if you take the average young couple who are renting a 2-bed house, if one or even both of them are working from home now, there really is that need for that 3rd bedroom. So in terms of the way rent increases have gone for the last 2 years, I'd say 3 bedrooms have outstripped 2 beds and 1 beds by far, because there's such a big demand for that 3rd bedroom now with working from home.
That's quite an interesting point, actually, because I suppose it sort of makes sense in as much as people, would always prefer to have a bit more space. But if it's obviously accelerating that growth and that increase in rents, it is very interesting. And I mean, would you? Sorry, please.
I was going to say, traditionally, 3-bed properties didn't yield that well for investors, so they tended to stick to the 2-bed terrace market, particularly in the northwest. That's kind of been flipped on its head a little bit now, and actually 3-bed semis around Warrington and within sort of 25 miles of our office, the 3-bed semi-detached market can yield just as well as the 2-bed terrace market now, because the rents have risen that much on 3-bed properties.
Do you see that trend continuing?
Well, I think working from home is definitely here to stay. So I think the demand for larger properties is definitely going to stay. There has been, we've noticed the last 8 to 10 months since we've sort of come out of the last lockdown and COVID has got quieter and quieter, there has been a bit of a trend for people to go back towards city centre apartments. Definitely we're seeing the rents going back to pre-COVID levels now in the city centres. But I think the demand for a larger property with more rooms is definitely here to stay. What's going to be impacted on that, though, is people's affordability, because obviously larger properties cost more to heat. The council tax is higher. So with the current cost of living crisis, you could argue that although the desire might be there for a 3-bedroom property, can people afford to run it and live in one?
No, it would be interesting then to see whether that almost reverses the trend as people, as you say, start to look for things that they can afford in terms of energy as well as the size of the property. And then just sort of final question, just sort of picking into your national expertise a bit here. Are you seeing any particular trends in terms of stock levels? Obviously, that's something which is very much in the news at the minute. But taking a global or national perspective, what trends are you seeing there?
Yeah, stock levels on the letting side have definitely been down. I mean, on the sales side, they really have, hence why the current price boom is happening, because there's so few properties for sale at the moment. But on the letting side, it's been impacted as well. We've seen a lot of our landlords look to sell properties over the last 2 years that have held properties for sort of 10 to 15 years. Various different reasons for that. Obviously, as people get older, they tend to want to liquidise their assets a bit more and go into sort of safer investments and things, and keep money to one side as cash. Also, the current price rises has meant properties are worth more money, so they see it as now potentially a good time to get in. Concerns about future recessions, price drops, etc., is now a good time to sell. But the tax implication of owning buy-to-let as well hasn't been great, as we know, for sort of the last 4 or 5 years. So there's a lot of landlords, particularly don't have limited company structures or not the most tax efficient setup, but decided now is a good time to come out of the market and potentially reinvest through a limited company in the future if they see the prices drop, or potentially come out of the market completely. But yeah, we've definitely seen a reduction in stock. We've definitely seen tenants stay in properties longer as well. We've noticed our sort of turnover rate of tenants has decreased. So again, it comes back to there's probably a desire for most people in a 2-bed to move to a 3-bed, but I think at the moment people's affordability is probably stretched a little bit, and they're wondering whether it's the right thing to do.
And that seems a pretty good overview of the situation, but I guess we'll see how that plays out over the coming few months and years. But let's get stuck into sort of the main topic of today then. Obviously, I was just picking on your expertise a bit there, just in terms of your national, the view that you can have across the country. But let's delve into kind of what was the impetus behind that spread, that expansion of your activities. I mean, how did this expansion of your activities come about? Was there a single point of this is what we aim to do, or did it just happen organically?
It kind of happened organically, and it was, I'll be honest with you, initially it was driven by the landlords. So what happened was, I mentioned at the sort of start of the podcast about how we started off with the traditional landlord, somebody from Warrington buying a property in Warrington, and then sort of pre the credit crunch, there was a big market of people from down south buying in the northwest for price points. So we're meeting a different type of landlord. And then what would happen is that landlord would buy a property in Warrington, for example, meet ourselves, and we'd rent that property for them. And then they'd come to us and say, look, I'm buying one in Liverpool, Manchester. You know, we've got a great relationship. I like what you guys do. Could you look after that for me? So we have to take a view at that point, whether we do that and we become that sort of company that pushes a bit further afield, or do we try and stay local and offer the service we were offering? And, you know, landlords are hard to find. So we took the view that while we've got landlords that like us and like our service, let's push it and, you know, manage properties for them a bit further afield. So it was really driven by the landlords initially, and then it kind of grew. And once we had our processes straight and we realized how to do it, you know, don't get me wrong, we made lots of mistakes at the start and lots of time wasted and things like that, going to places we didn't need to go. But once we had our processes right, we worked out that actually, you know, we could do this and offer it as something to new landlords. So we could meet a new landlord who might be buying a property nowhere near Warrington, and we could still offer our services.
Now, you've mentioned some of the mistakes and things that you went through. Do you have any examples just that other people might be able to avoid them?
I mean, how long's a podcast? But yeah, look, the key thing is we've tried to manage properties further afield is processes and systems. And in the early days, you know, technology has moved on leaps and bounds since COVID kicked in. I mean, in terms of our industry, as a lettings industry, the things you can do now that we couldn't do pre-COVID are pretty amazing, really. So yeah, in terms of getting process right, we would spend a lot of time, you know, doing individual viewings of properties where we never really thought about, you know, managing diaries properly and making sure if someone was going to Birmingham, is there anything else they could do on the way? Was there inspections they could do on a property while they were there? Is there something they could be doing on the way back or on the way down? And that is the hardest bit. We're trying to manage properties at a distance from your office is diary management, really. It was all new to us. So we just kind of, you get that initial excitement where you put a property on Rightmove and someone rings for a viewing and wants to go that afternoon and you kind of drop everything to do it. We're a bit more structured now in how we work, and we learned very quickly that just because someone wants to view a property that afternoon doesn't necessarily mean they're going to take it, or even doesn't mean they're going to turn up to the actual viewing. So yeah, we're a lot more structured now in how we work.
And how would you say that you work? I mean, how does it work in terms of the logistics? I mean, are you all, you know, physically based in Warrington? Is that, and then you travel out, or is it that you have people sort of located across the country to be able to react?
So we're all based in the northwest. We're not all based in the office in Warrington. We have a core of people who are based in the office. So the team that deal with maintenance and accounts, etc., are all based in the office. Anyone who goes out and deals with viewings, inspections, check-ins, inventories, for example, generally works from home and comes into the office 1 or 2 days a week. But all of us are based in the northwest. So you know, for example, I'm based out near Northwich, which isn't a million miles away from Warrington, but it's probably about 40 minutes south of the office. So I can cover the Midlands fairly easily from where I am because I'm kind of a few junctions down the M6 already. And we've got somebody based in Manchester who tends to cover everything going out that way, Manchester going out to Leeds, Hull, any of the east of England. So yeah, no, we all technically work from the Warrington office, as in all the keys are held here. You know, the bulk of the staff are based here and all our systems are here, although everything's cloud-based, so we can work anywhere. But the most of us that are out on the road tend to work from home.
And obviously, when you're going out to these different areas, these different regions to offer these services, I mean, how important is it to the landlords or tenants or whoever it may be within those areas that you have, you know, local knowledge? Is it something that you work on building up for each different area? Is it something that you look into just before you know, as you travel down there, for example? I mean, how does that work and how important is it?
I'd say it's more important to landlords and tenants, definitely. Tenants are really only interested is the property that they want. You do get the odd tenant who's maybe moving into a new area, wants to know a little bit about the property and what's located around it. We tend to do our own research. So once we appoint a property manager for a property and we know who in our team is going to be dealing with that property, they would generally do their own little bit of research on that property and see what's around the area, where the local supermarkets are, you know, the points of interest that might help with tenants that are doing viewings. But generally, most people don't tend to move that far, so know the area they're moving to. Landlords obviously are keen to know that you can not necessarily have that local knowledge, but you can pick it up fairly quickly. They want to understand that you're somebody who understands property. You know what tenants are looking for. And what landlords are really interested in is, look, once a tenant moves in, how are you going to manage his property? What's going to happen with the inspections? Do you have contractors in the area? That's really the landlord's big concern, not so much the knowledge of, where's the nearest train station, because let's be honest, Rightmove, Zoopla gives all that information to people nowadays anyway. It's more about the actual property management. So once a tenant's in, what happens from there? How easy can you react to something that goes wrong? And is that going to be feasible for you to manage it from 100 miles away?
No, I noticed on your site that you did talk about the extensive network and obviously, as you mentioned, innovative marketing technologies that you invest in. I mean, is that how you provide that information, that assurance to your landlords that you have these contractors in place? I mean, how do you build up those relationships to be able to facilitate the service in the best way?
Well, it gets easier as you get bigger, and that sounds crazy, but obviously the more properties you've got in a new area, the easier it is to find contractors. You get better relationships with people. So it's always, the hardest bit is always that first breaking into a new area. So, for example, we're based in Warrington. The first property we got in Birmingham wasn't easy to manage, but now we have probably about 57 in Birmingham. So actually contractors there are relatively easy to find now because we give them so much work. They know we pay them on time, so it's a lot easier to build those relationships when you're up and running. The technology side has really, as I think I said previously, come on leaps and bounds since COVID. So we do use things like remote inspections where we can. We don't necessarily do all our inspections in person now. We tend to do every other one in person, and unless there's an issue with the property and it needs a face-to-face appointment. So we try and use technology as much as possible, and that is really key. Again, things like Good Lord are perfect. I can be sat on a train coming back from London and I can key an application on. I've not got to get the tenant to sign anything face to face. It can all be done in the 2 hours it takes me to get back from Euston to Bank Key in Warrington. The application can be on, the tenant can pass referencing if they use open banking, and you're away. So you've got to embrace technology. You can't avoid it if you're going to be doing lettings at a distance, I don't think.
I guess with the question of technology, though, although I am obviously biased, as I say, working at Good Lord, I know that the aim of technology is always to support agents, our technology in particular is to support agents to do their jobs in a more effective, more efficient way. It's not to stop them from having face-to-face interactions and things like that. So, but when you're working at a distance, how do you maintain that level of that sort of personal service for landlords and tenants? Is that something that you have ever struggled with, or is it just something that you've managed to find a solution for?
No, we've never struggled because I think the world is changing in that regard. People would much rather send a WhatsApp now than actually pick the phone up or have a coffee. And again, I know I keep saying about COVID, but I think it's been a real game changer in our industry and in terms of the way people work. People kind of got out of the habit of going to face-to-face meetings. The amount of time I used to spend on the road going and meeting landlords and sitting having a coffee with them. That was basically my week. And now that's all kind of changed. I'd rather do a Zoom call or just have a WhatsApp video or something. So I think the world has changed. And I'm mid-40s, so I'm kind of getting older. And you tend to sort of embrace technology when you're younger. So the type of tenant profile that we're dealing with now, which tends to be people in their early 20s, they generally don't want to pick the phone up and have a conversation. They would rather deal with, through their phone, whether it's WhatsApp or sending a text message or sending an email. They seem to embrace that. And people can do it outside of work hours as well then. Landlords send me a text on a Saturday morning or a Friday evening. And they know that generally they'll get a text back within 2 or 3 hours, depending on what time of day it is. So they know you can be a bit more flexible with your time. If someone wants a meeting, it's got to be a set time on a set day, whereas a quick WhatsApp video, you can do it any time of day, really. So although it seems like it's less of a personal service by not meeting people face to face, actually, I think you can sometimes give people a better service by using your time a lot smarter and not being sat on motorways or sat in Costa Coffee when there's lots more things you could be doing in the office and using your time a bit more proactively.
We'll be right back after this message.
Do you want to stop wasting time on admin and jumping between different platforms to get just one job done? Do you want to focus on your agency's business goals instead? From automated offer letters and e-signing to online referencing and even rent collection, Goodlord can help your agency get rid of the admin-heavy parts of your lettings job in one integrated platform, so you can refocus on your business and your customers. Head to goodlord.co today to learn more. Goodlord, it's just that good.
Actually, on that point, perhaps remind me when you sort of started this expansion. Was it, so it's pre-COVID, presumably, that you started?
Oh yes, we started taking properties on, well outside of Warrington, 2005, I would say. Yeah, pre credit crunch. Yeah.
And at that stage, I would suggest that your opinion would possibly have changed even more now. But did you ever consider having more physical branches, or whether setting up virtual branches elsewhere?
We did, yeah. It was something that crossed our mind, and then kind of the credit crunch hit, so that sort of put a lot of things like that on hold in terms of big investment and big expansion, because the property market reduced massively in terms of number of transactions. 2008 to 2010, 11, there wasn't much purchasing going on at all. So in some ways that kind of did us a bit of a favor, because we could be sat here now with 10 offices that we might not really need. So in some ways that did us a favor a little bit. But yeah, it was the initial plan to actually have lots of satellite offices dotted around in locations where we have properties, and now we've realized that actually you don't need that. We can run everything from here. Now that's not to say that moving forward we might not we might sort of take on property managers that are based a bit further afield. At the moment, we only recruit people that can be in Warrington within an hour, because we like them to come into the office 1-2 days a week. We have weekly meetings in the office to run through what new properties we're taking on, issues, etc. But it may be that, as the portfolio grows in London, for example, we can justify recruiting somebody who lives in London and deals solely with the London portfolio, because it'd be easy for them to manage from down there potentially. So yeah, that as we grow, that sort of satellite presence will probably still come about, but in a different format from having traditional branches, I think, on the high street.
No, that makes sense. And it would perhaps be interesting, as you say, London, it's quite a different market as well, and everything moves so quickly that having somebody actually physically in that location, I suppose as everywhere in England, it might be one of the more logical places for that to be the case.
I would say so.
Yeah. And in terms of making your landlords and tenants and so on aware that you obviously do operate on this national scale, how do you get that awareness out there, through marketing or however it is? Is it word of mouth? Is it marketing? I mean, how do you make your presence known across the areas that you obviously work in?
So it's a mixture of things. We don't generally market for new landlords in specific locations. We tend, obviously, we're always speaking to our database. We use various bits of software to do that, to constantly speak to our current database of landlords. And most of those generally know now that we'll manage properties in different locations, because most of them have a portfolio that's spread across various locations. Most of our landlords that have got more than one property probably don't have them properties in the same town. We've got landlords with, say, 6 or 7 properties that are dotted all around the north of England. So most of them are well aware. We have a couple of sort of large introducers that refer landlords to us, who know that we operate in various locations. Now, when you first come to meet those landlords, you do have to explain how you do that, because it is a big question that landlords have. Look, you're based in Warrington, I'm buying a property in Hull. I'm not used to this. How are you going to do it? I would expect to bring an agent in Hull and get them to manage a property. So you do have to sort of overcome a few challenges with that landlord and explain how the business works, and explain how things have moved on. I think people can see for themselves now how finding a property has changed. Most people, if they're looking to buy a house or rent a house, know that the first place you start is Rightmove. No one really goes trawling through estate agents' windows anymore. So I think most people know that finding a tenant actually can be done from pretty much anywhere in the country. That's not too difficult. It comes back to that property management and looking after the property once the tenant's moved in. That tends to be landlord's big concern, I would say.
And in terms of, but obviously that's one side of things, it's the referral side. But, what are your thoughts on acquisitions and things like that in terms of growing? Obviously, the industry seems to be consolidating quite a lot at the minute, and obviously because you already have that national, or you can offer that national service. How would you say that acquisitions would kind of play into that?
Yeah, we're looking at it all the time, and we're always interested if the right business comes along. It's a bit of a double-edged sword, I think, growth by acquisition, because there's lots of issues that come with it, lots of problems. We've done very well to get our business to where we have organically without going down the acquisition route, and we would prefer to continue that way. But I think there comes a point where, if I take London as an example, okay, we're getting to a point where we don't quite have a big enough portfolio inside the M25 to justify taking on a full-time person. But if we had another 20 properties, we probably could do. So we look at now, do we go and acquire an agent potentially, and then that gives you an existing staff base in that location, so you don't need to potentially recruit somebody, and it's a staff base that knows that location and knows some of those properties. So it is quite an attractive proposition. It seems to be the way some agents are going at the moment, particularly in the Northwest. We're seeing some big consolidation up here. A lot of the larger agents are buying other large agents, which is quite strange. Traditionally it's always been large agents buying independents, but now it seems like everyone's buying everybody. So yeah, I think acquisition is a potential route to go down, but it is a bit of a double-edged sword and come with lots of problems as well as benefits.
And kind of on almost the other side of the coin, now that you are operating nationally, have you realised that anything is actually better to be kept within the local area?
Probably not now. As I say, during the early days, there was times when we thought, do we really want to be doing this? Should we just stick to Warrington? But now I think because of the change in technology, it's made it a lot easier than it was. I mean, we'll always keep, obviously, our core functions in the head office, so accounting, the maintenance department, etc. We'll always keep that in Warrington because it makes sense. We're all based near Warrington, and we've got an office here. I don't see the real need to start splitting that up and moving that around into different locations. I think it helps if that core day-to-day management is all in one location, so people can speak to each other easier, and be on top of things a bit more. It's different for the guys that are out on the road because they don't always need that day-to-day contact with the office, but the people that are dealing with maintenance and accounts are generally speaking to each other all the time, so it helps to keep that definitely more local. There's pressures again with working from home, where a lot of people now want to be able to work from home 1 or 2 days a week because they see everybody else doing it. That's brought some pressure as well into how we run the office. But yeah, in terms of sort of moving other roles into other locations, I don't think there's any real benefit to that now with the way that you can work so easy. All of our systems are cloud-based, so we can do the job from anywhere pretty much.
Now that makes complete sense. And as you say, that's sort of what technology and things are there to do. It's to take those things, I suppose, the admin side of things really, and make it easy just to be able to do it anywhere. But if you could sort of summarize, I suppose, in terms of the pros and cons that you found I know that we've obviously touched on some of them, but we may have missed some that may have come to you throughout this conversation. What would you say the pros and cons are of expanding in this way?
Well, I think the pros to doing it organically and to reaching out a bit further is obviously, well, going nationally, you have a much bigger market to tap into straight away. If you just stick to Warrington, you're limited to however many rooftops are in Warrington, whereas now we've got potentially the whole of England as a market. It means you can maintain your relationship with your landlords a lot better. So we've got landlords, as I say, have probably owned properties in 6 or 7 different locations. Well, if they were using 6 or 7 different agents, then they're not potentially getting the best service because they've got to get information from all different places. They can have one point of contact by working with one agent. And if they've got questions on different properties, they ring one person. So if there's a couple of issues with rents, they have one person in our accounts department that they speak to. We have a login area for landlords where they can log in on our website, and it gives them all the information they need about their property. So obviously all of that is in one place for them, regardless of where the property is. So they can see their whole portfolio at the click of a button. So it does work very well for landlords. The downsides are there's a lot of traveling involved still. We haven't taken the decision to use things like Viewber, for example. We've decided to do all the viewings ourselves, mainly because we want to give the landlords the assurance that we have met the person that's moving into their property. We've vetted them personally. We've got the right information about them. Also, we want to meet our tenants face to face at some point. The one big benefit of using Good Lord is you don't have to have lots of face-to-face meetings with the tenants, but at some point we do like to meet them so they know who they're dealing with. So the biggest con is, look, there's still a lot of traveling involved with managing properties at a distance. So you've got to get your processes and your diary management straight. And if anyone's going to go down the route of managing properties nationally, I'd recommend you do that before you start taking on properties and in different locations. And like ourselves, we just thought, yeah, let's just do it and got on with it, and then worried about the processes afterwards.
I was just going to ask whether you had any top tips for people looking to do the same, and there's one right there.
Yeah,
so.
Just think about how you're going to do it before you start. It's it's a lot easier now than it was in 2005. Don't get me wrong, but yeah, you just really got to think about how you're going to structure your diaries. Whether it's feasible, because it doesn't work for everybody. It doesn't work for everybody. So you've got to think, have you got the right team around you? Have you got the right people in place? It's not the right move for everybody. Lots of agents stay local, and it works very well for them. But it's a big market out there if you can go outside of your local area.
And just to wrap up, obviously you're seeing success in how you've set this up and having taken this jump to operate nationally. Do you see that this is the direction that other agencies will take? Do you think that we'll start seeing more agencies looking to expand their footprint because of technologies and so on?
Probably not to the extent that we've done it. So, if you think we're in Warrington, we manage properties in Newcastle upon Tyne, manage properties in central London. I don't think everyone would go down that route. I certainly see, as I'm out on the road now, boards popping up in places that are an hour away from Warrington agents that wouldn't normally have popped up. So I do wonder whether that's just a coincidence or whether more people now are thinking, actually, we can manage properties a bit further away from home. And it's a conscious decision to do that. Or whether, like ourselves, they've got a landlord who's approached them and said, look, you manage 2 properties of mine, I'm buying this other one an hour down the road. Is there any chance you could do it for me? I think, given the changes that have happened over the last few years and just general, globalization, for want of a better word, where the world's become a smaller place, I do think more agents will start looking a bit further afield at how they can grow their business. Definitely. It's a really competitive market. What we do always has been. That's not changed. But because it's so competitive, if you can tap into new markets, it can be really lucrative and beneficial. So, I think more people would do it, but probably not to the extent that we have, because it's not easy. And a lot of agents still want to keep a bit of control and have the properties closer to home. There's lots of alternatives out there, like franchise models and things like that, but I'm still not totally convinced they're the way forward for most people.
That seems a good summary and a good note to end on, I think. Thank you ever so much, Darren, for joining. I think that's been really interesting. I think, and thank you ever so much.